The message came to every species in the galaxy at the same time. It was a warning, the kind that had been sent for thousands of years whenever a new civilization reached the stars. The Galactic Council had created this warning long ago, and they sent it to every young species that discovered space travel. The warning was simple. Stay quiet. Keep your minds dim. Do not let your thoughts shine too bright in the darkness between stars. Because something lives there. Something hungry. Something old. They called them the Devourers. Commander Lisa Grant stood on the bridge of the Earth vessel, starbound, and read the message 3 times. Her crew watched her face, waiting for her reaction. Danny Reyes, her tactical officer, had already pulled up everything the ship's computers could find about these Devourers. Karen Webb, the science officer, was running the message through every translation program they had. So let me understand this, Lisa said slowly. The entire galaxy has been living in fear of these things for 12,000 years. Every species out there tiptoes through space, afraid to think too loud, afraid to broadcast too far, afraid to even dream too big, because of monsters in the dark. That appears to be correct, Commander, Karen said. Her voice was calm, the way it always was when she was processing something strange. The Veluxy ambassador is requesting an immediate communication. He says it is urgent. Lisa nodded, and the view screen flickered to life. The Veluxy ambassador was an insectoid creature with large compound eyes and delicate antennae that trembled as he spoke. His name was impossible for human mouths to pronounce, so they had agreed to call him Victor. Commander Grant, Victor said, and his voice shook with something Lisa recognized as fear. You must listen to me. Your species is in terrible danger. You have been broadcasting your presence across the galaxy since you left your home system. Your ships shine like beacons. Your colonies pulse with unshielded thought. The Devourers will notice you. They always notice. Lisa leaned back in her chair. Tell me about these Devourers, Victor. What exactly are they? Victor's compound eyes seemed to grow darker. They are ancient. Older than any civilization in this galaxy. They exist in the spaces between dimensions, in the darkness between stars. They feed on conscious thought, on fear, on the psychic energy of living minds. When they find a civilization that shines too bright, they descend upon it like a plague. They consume everything, every mind, every thought, every dream. Nothing remains. Has anyone ever fought them? Danny asked from his station. Victor made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. Fight them? You cannot fight a Devourer. You cannot even look upon one without losing your sanity. Their forms exist outside normal space. Their very presence breaks the minds of those who witness them. The only defense is to hide, to be small, to be quiet. To hope they never notice you? Lisa was quiet for a long moment. She looked at her crew, at the men and women who had volunteered to explore the unknown reaches of space. She thought about Earth. It's about the billions of humans who had finally reached the stars after centuries of dreaming about them. Victor, she said finally, I appreciate the warning. I really do. But humanity has been dealing with monsters since we lived in caves. We have faced predators with nothing but pointed sticks. We have survived ice ages and plagues and wars that nearly wiped us out. We did not survive all of that by hiding in the dark. Victor's antennae went rigid with shock. You do not understand. The Devourers are not like your Earth predators. They are cosmic horrors. They are nightmares made real. They will destroy you, maybe Lisa said. Or maybe we will surprise you. Humanity has a long history of surprising things that thought they could destroy us. She ended the communication and turned to her crew. Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them about the Devourers. Tell them everything the Veluxy told us, and then tell them that we are going to find out more about these monsters. Because I have a feeling that running and hiding is not going to be our approach. 3 weeks passed. The Starbound continued its mission, mapping new systems and making contact with other species. Every alien they met told them the same thing. Hide. Be quiet. The Devourers are coming. And then the Devourers came. The colony of New Portland was a small settlement on a green world at the edge of human space. 12,000 people lived there, farmers and miners and families who wanted a simple life among the stars. They had no idea that their thoughts, their dreams, their very consciousness had been calling out into the void like a dinner bell. The devourer emerged from the darkness between dimensions on a quiet Tuesday morning. It appeared above the colony like a wound in reality, a thing of impossible angles and shifting shadows. It had too many eyes and too many mouths, and parts of it existed in places that human minds could not comprehend. The Veluxi. Observation team that had been monitoring the colony from orbit went mad within seconds. Their screams echoed across the communication channels, as their minds shattered from simply looking at the creature, but the humans did not scream. Lisa Grant had brought the Starbound to New Portland as soon as the first sensors detected the dimensional rift. She stood on her bridge and looked at the creature on her view screen. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were shaking. Every instinct she had was telling her to run, to hide, to get as far away from this thing as possible. She did not run. "Karen," she said, and her voice was steady even though her body was not. "Are you getting readings on this thing?" Karen Webb was pale. Sweat dripped down her face. But her fingers moved across her console with practiced precision. "Yes, Commander. The creature appears to exist partially outside our dimension. It is projecting some kind of psychic field that targets the fear centers of the brain. That is what is causing the terror response. Can we block it?" "I am working on it." Danny Reyes had his weapons console active. His jaw was clenched tight. "Commander, the Veluxi ships are fleeing. They are leaving the system. Should we follow?" Lisa watched the devourer descend toward the colony. She thought about the 12,000 people down there. She thought about what Victor had said about how no one could fight these things. "No," she said. "We are not leaving. Danny, charge all weapons. Karen, keep working on that psychic shielding. We are going to find out if these things can die." The Starbound moved toward the monster, a single small ship against a nightmare from beyond the stars. Every species watching from the edges of the system expected to see them destroyed in moments. Instead, they saw something that would change the galaxy forever. They saw humans fight back. The battle above New Portland lasted for 6 hours. The Starbound fired every weapon it had at the devourer. Missiles exploded against its shifting form. Energy beams cut through parts of its body that flickered in and out of existence. Nothing seemed to hurt it, but nothing seemed to destroy the Starbound either. The creature was confused. In all its ancient existence, it had never encountered prey that did not flee. It had never faced a species that looked upon its terrible form and responded with violence instead of terror. The fear was there. It could taste it in the minds of the humans, but they kept fighting anyway. They kept pushing forward, even as their minds screamed at them to run by the third hour. Karen Webb had figured out how to partially block the psychic terror field. It was not perfect. The crew still felt the fear, still had to fight against the urge to collapse into madness. But they could function. They could think. They could fight by the 5th hour. They had discovered something important. The devourer could be hurt. Not by normal weapons, but by a specific frequency of energy that disrupted its dimensional anchoring. Danny Reyes had found it by accident, adjusting the ship's shields to better block the psychic attacks. The energy feedback had caused the creature to recoil in what might have been pain. By the 6th hour, the devourer retreated. It did not flee in fear. It was not defeated, but it pulled back, confused and uncertain, trying to understand what had just happened. In 12,000 years, no prey had ever made it retreat. Lisa Grant collapsed into her command chair as the creature faded back into the darkness between dimensions. Her entire body was shaking. Her mind felt like it had been scraped raw. But she was smiling. "Give me a channel to Earth command," she said. "And someone get me some coffee. We have a lot of work to do." The news spread across the galaxy like fire. Humanity had faced a devourer and survived. Not just survived, but fought back. The Galactic Council demanded explanations. The Veluxi ambassador requested an immediate meeting. Every species that had spent thousands of years hiding in the dark wanted to know how the humans had done it. 6 months later, The research station designated Nightmare 1 was completed in orbit around Earth's moon. It was the most secure facility humanity had ever built, designed to contain things that should not exist. And in its central chamber, held in place by energy fields that Karen Webb had spent months perfecting, was a devourer. They had captured it alive. Dr. Paul Martinez was the lead researcher on the project. He was a short man with thick glasses and a calm demeanor that never seemed to change, no matter what he was looking at. He had spent his career studying the most dangerous predators on Earth, from great white sharks to venomous snakes to the microscopic parasites that killed millions every year. The devourer was just another predator to him. A very strange one, but a predator nonetheless. The fear response it generates is fascinating, he said during one of his many reports to the Oversight Committee. It targets the amygdala directly, bypassing all our normal sensory systems. Pure terror, injected straight into the brain. Most species would be completely overwhelmed by it. They would lose all ability to think rationally. But not humans? Asked Admiral Chris Boyle, the military liaison to the project. Paul shook his head. Humans are different. We evolved on a planet full of things that wanted to eat us. Our ancestors had to function through fear every single day just to survive. We developed the ability to feel terror and still act. To be scared out of our minds and still think clearly enough to fight or plan or escape. It is built into our DNA. He turned to look at the creature in its containment field. It writhed and twisted, shapes forming and dissolving in ways that hurt to look at. Eyes opened and closed across its surface. Mouths full of impossible teeth snapped at nothing. The devourer evolved to hunt species that freeze when they are afraid, Paul continued. Species that shut down, that cannot think, that simply wait to be consumed. It has never encountered a species that uses fear as fuel. That fights harder when it is scared. That gets angry at things that try to terrify it. Over the next year, I learned more about the devourers than the galaxy had discovered in 12 millennia of running from them. They mapped the creature's neural patterns, such as they were. They figured out how it fed, how it reproduced, how it communicated with others of its kind across the vast distances between dimensions, and then they made a breakthrough that would change everything. They learned how to talk to it. The devourers were not mindless beasts. They were intelligent in their own alien way. They had thoughts and desires, and something that might have been emotions. They had simply never had any reason to communicate with their food before. Lisa Grant was present for the first successful communication. She watched as Paul sent carefully constructed signals into the creature's mind and received responses that the computers translated into something approaching language. What do you want? Paul asked. The response came slowly, filtered through translation programs that struggled to make sense of concepts that existed outside human understanding. Always hungry. Feed on fear. Feed on minds. Feed on the bright lights in the darkness. Why do you hunt us? Lisa asked. You shine? You think? You dream. So bright. So loud. Cannot ignore. Must feed. Paul leaned forward, his eyes bright with curiosity. What if we could give you what you need without you having to hunt us? What if we could work together? The devourer was silent for a long moment. Its form shifted and churned as it processed this completely alien concept. Together? Prey and predator? Not possible. On our world, Lisa said, we have taken wolves and turned them into dogs. We have taken wild horses and made them our partners. We have tamed every predator we ever encountered. Why should you be any different? The creature had no response to that. But it did not attack. It did not try to flee. It simply watched them with its countless eyes, trying to understand these strange small creatures that refused to act like prey. The training began the next day. It was slow work, dangerous work. 3 researchers died in the first month when the containment fields fluctuated and the creature lashed out. But humanity had not gotten this far by giving up when things got hard. They adjusted their methods. They learned from their mistakes. They kept pushing forward. By the end of the second year, the devourer responded to commands. Simple ones at first. Move here. Stop there. Do not feed on that mind. But it was learning. It was adapting. And somewhere in its ancient alien consciousness was beginning to understand that these small, fragile creatures were not prey. They were something new. Something it had never encountered before. They were masters. The Zephyrini were a proud species. They had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 3,000 years, conquering every civilization they encountered and adding them to their empire. They were tall and powerful, with scaled skin and claws that could tear through metal. They feared nothing and no one. When humanity began expanding into space near their territory, the Zephyrini saw only weakness. These humans were small and soft. They had no natural weapons, no armored skin, no venomous bite. They were clearly meant to be conquered. The attack on Harvest Bay was meant to send a message. The Zephyrini war fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel above the human colony without warning. They bombarded the settlement from orbit for 3 hours. When they left, 16,000 humans were dead. Men, women, and children who had done nothing wrong except live on a world the Zephyrini wanted. The message was clear: surrender or be destroyed. Humanity's response was not what the Zephyrini expected. Admiral Zephyri stood on the bridge of the carrier Thunderchild and looked at the fleet assembled around him. 50 human warships armed with the most advanced weapons Earth had ever produced. But they were not what made his fleet special. 3. Devourers moved in formation alongside the human ships. It had taken 2 years of work to reach this point. 2 years of training and conditioning, and building the specialized control ships that allowed human pilots to bond with the creatures. The pilots had to be carefully selected. They needed strong minds, iron wills, and the ability to remain calm while connected to a being of pure nightmare. Lieutenant Nina Torres was one of those pilots. She sat in the control chair of her ship, the small vessel that served as the anchor point for Devourer 2. Her mind was linked to the creature through a neural interface that Paul Martinez had designed. She could feel its hunger, its ancient alien thoughts, its desire to feed on the bright minds around it. She could also control it. Devourer Squadron reporting ready. Admiral, she said through the communication channel. Her voice was calm and steady, though sweat dripped down her face from the effort of maintaining the link. Awaiting your orders, Chris nodded slowly. He had seen footage of what the Zephyrini had done to Harvest Bay. He had watched the recordings of children running and screaming as fire fell from the sky. He had attended the memorial services for 16,000 innocent people. All ships, he said, prepare for faster-than-light jump. We are going to pay the Zephyrini a visit. The Zephyrini war fleet was gathered in the Casper system, celebrating their easy victory over the weak humans. Their commander, a massive scaled warrior named Vorthok, was planning his next attack when his sensors detected the incoming ships. Humans, he growled with contempt. They come to surrender. Open a communication channel. I want to hear them beg. The channel opened, but there was no begging. Admiral Boyle's face appeared on Vorthak's screen, and his expression was cold and hard. Vorthak of the Zephyrini, Chris said. You attacked a peaceful human colony. You murdered 16,000 innocent people. I am here to deliver our response. Vorthok laughed. Your response? You bring 50 ships against our 200. You humans are even more foolish than I thought. We will crush you like insects and add your worlds to our empire. Chris smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I did not just bring ships. He gave the signal, and the devourers emerged from the darkness. Vorthak's laugh died in his throat as 3 nightmares from beyond. Reality appeared in his sensor display. His crew began to scream as the psychic terror field washed over them. Soldiers who had never known fear in their lives fell to the deck, clutching their heads and weeping. Some went mad instantly, their minds unable to process what they were seeing. What are those things? Vorthok demanded, fighting against the terror that clawed at his own mind. What have you done? We tamed them, Chris said simply. Nina, you may begin. Lieutenant Nina Torres felt the hunger of Devourer 2 through their link. The creature wanted to feed. It could taste the fear of the Zephyrini, bright and delicious, flooding the space around them. She gave it permission. The Devourer descended on the Zephyrini fleet like a wolf among sheep. It moved through ships as if they were not there, its form passing through holes and bulkheads without slowing. Everywhere it went, it fed. Soldiers collapsed as their minds were drained. Some died instantly. Others lived but would never recover, their consciousness torn apart and consumed. The other two Devourers joined the attack, guided by their bonded pilots. The human warships followed, their weapons finishing off the Zephyrini vessels that the creatures left crippled and drifting. Vorthok tried to rally his fleet, Earth Fae, but there was nothing to rally. His soldiers could not fight. They could not think. They could only feel terror beyond anything they had ever imagined. In his final moments, Vorthok managed to send a transmission to the Galactic Council. His voice was broken, his pride shattered, his mind barely holding together. "The humans," he gasped. "They have tamed the nightmares. They have made the Devourers their weapons. The universe must know. The humans are not prey. They are something far worse." The transmission cut off as Devourer 2 found his ship. The Battle of Casper lasted less than an hour. When it was over, the Zephyrini war fleet no longer existed. 200 ships, reduced to drifting wreckage and crews of mindless shells. The human fleet had not lost a single vessel. Nina Torres slumped in her control chair as she released the link with Devourer 2. She was exhausted, drained from the effort of directing the creature, but there was also something else. A feeling of satisfaction that seemed to come from the creature itself. It had fed well, and it had pleased its master. "Good job," she whispered, and she could feel the Devourer's response. Not words, but a feeling, contentment, belonging, something that might have been loyalty. The news of the battle spread across the galaxy within days. Every species learned what had happened at Casper. They learned that humanity had not just survived the Devourers, they had turned them into weapons. They had used the galaxy's greatest nightmare to destroy an enemy. Fleet without losing a single ship, the Galactic Council called an emergency session. Ambassadors from 100 species demanded answers. How had the humans done this? What did it mean for the future? Were they now the most dangerous species in the galaxy? But the question that no one dared to ask out loud was the one that kept them all awake at night. What else were the humans planning to tame? The moon called Erebus was a dead world circling a dying star at the edge of known space. Nothing lived there. Nothing had ever lived there. The radiation from the red giant star made sure of that. It was the perfect place to build a facility that no one was supposed to know about. They called it the Sanctuary. Director Amy Holland stood at the observation window of her office and looked out at the facility she had built. Dozens of containment buildings dotted the gray surface of the moon, each one designed to hold something that should not exist. Devourers were only the beginning of what humanity had found in the darkness between stars. "The latest specimen is secure in Chamber 12, said her assistant, Kevin Price. He was a young man with nervous eyes who had somehow managed to keep his sanity despite working at the Sanctuary for 3 years. The capture team took some losses, but they got it contained. Amy nodded without turning around. Casualties. 7 dead. 12 in the medical bay. 3 of those probably won't make it. Kevin's voice was flat. He had delivered too many reports like this to feel the full weight of the words anymore. What about the creature? It's a stellar parasite. 3rd one we've found. This one was feeding on a brown dwarf star about 60 light years from here. Dr. Martinez thinks it's a juvenile. Amy finally turned from the window. A juvenile? How big is it? About 2 kilometers long. The adults can reach 50. She let out a slow breath. A creature 2 kilometers long was a juvenile, and humanity was trying to tame it. Sometimes she wondered if her species was brave or simply insane. Most days, she suspected it was both. The Sanctuary had been Amy's idea. After the battle at Casper, it became clear that the Devourers were not the only monsters lurking in the darkness. The galaxy was full of things that other species had learned to avoid. creatures that fed on stars, beings that existed as living storms of radiation, entities that could only be described as holes in reality itself. Every other civilization ran from these things. They mapped where the monsters lived and plotted courses around them. They built their empires in the safe spaces, the quiet corners where nothing lurked. Humanity decided to collect them instead. Amy walked through the facility, reviewing the specimens they had gathered over the past 5 years. In Chamber 7, a Thought Eater from the Andromeda Void paced its enclosure. The creature was invisible to normal light, visible only as an absence of darkness, a shadow that was somehow darker than the shadows around it. It fed on conscious thought, draining the minds of anyone who came too close. Paul Martinez had figured out how to communicate with it. They were still working on taming it. In Chamber 15, Void Singer hung suspended in a containment field filled with exotic matter. It was a creature that existed in multiple dimensions at once, its song capable of tearing holes in the fabric of reality. 3 researchers had been lost to those tears before they figured out how to keep it quiet. Now they were studying how to use those tears as a form of instant transportation. In Chamber 20, something that had no name yet sat in perfect stillness. They had found it floating in the space between galaxies, a ball of living metal that seemed to absorb all energy that touched it. It had been dormant when they captured it. No one knew what would happen when it woke up. They were trying to figure that out before it did. Director Kevin said, catching up to her as she walked. The Maloki delegation is requesting another meeting. They want to know how we do it. Amy smiled thinly. The Maloki were an old species, one of the founding members of the Galactic Council. They had spent 10,000 years building a civilization based on caution and hiding. Now they wanted to know humanity's secret. Tell them what we always tell them, she said. Humanity spent millions of years as prey. We learned that the only way to survive was to become the thing predators fear. We looked into the abyss, and we didn't blink. Eventually, the abyss got uncomfortable and looked away. They won't accept that answer. Then they won't understand the truth. Amy stopped at a window overlooking Chamber 12, where the juvenile stellar parasite coiled around an artificial sun they had built for it. Every species in this galaxy evolved to avoid danger. When they saw something scary, they ran. When they found something dangerous, they stayed away. That's a perfectly reasonable survival strategy. She watched the creature feed, its massive form pulsing with absorbed energy. Humans evolved differently. When we saw something scary, we wanted to know more about it. When we found something dangerous, we tried to figure out how to use it. We didn't run from predators. We hunted them. We didn't hide from fire. We tamed it. We didn't fear the atom. We split it open and used it to power our cities. So you're saying humans are just built differently, Kevin said. I'm saying that fear makes most species freeze. Fear makes humans angry. And angry humans have a very long history of conquering the things that scared them. The communication system in her office chimed with an incoming priority message. Amy returned to her desk and opened it. The face that appeared on her screen was Dr. Paul Martinez, calling from the research station on Earth. Amy, he said, and there was an edge of excitement in his usually calm voice. We found something. Something big. What is it? The Devourers are afraid of something. Amy felt a chill run down her spine. The Devourers were ancient cosmic horrors that had terrorized the galaxy for eons. The idea that there was something that scared them was almost too much to process. What do you mean they're afraid? She asked. We've been deepening our communication with Devourer Prime, the original specimen. It's been telling us things. Things about where it came from, how it evolved, what it remembers from before. And it keeps mentioning something. Something older. Something that exists in the spaces between the spaces, in the dimensions behind the dimensions. Another predator? Paul nodded slowly. The Devourers feed on conscious thought. But there's something out there that feeds on them. Something that hunts them the way they hunt us. They call it the Sleeper. And according to Devourer Prime, it's been dormant for millions of years. Amy stared at the screen. And let me guess. You think it's waking up? Our instruments have been picking up strange readings from outside the galaxy. Energy signatures that match what the Devourer describes. Whatever the sleeper is, I think it's starting to stir. A normal species would have been terrified by this news. A normal species would have started making plans to run, to hide, to find somewhere the sleeper would never find them. Amy Holland smiled. Start gathering data, she said. Everything the Devourer can tell us about this sleeper. I want to know what it is, where it is, and how it works. And Paul, yes? Start building a trap. If there's something out there that scares the Devourers, I want to meet it. She ended the communication and turned to look out the window at the moon's gray surface. Somewhere out there, something ancient and terrible was waking up. Something that had hunted the hunters. Something that made nightmares afraid, and humanity was going to try to tame it. Because that was what humans did. 10 years had passed since humanity first encountered the Devourers. 10 years since a single ship called the Starbound had refused to run from a cosmic nightmare. 10 years since everything changed. The Galactic Council Chamber was the largest enclosed space in known civilization. It had been built to hold representatives from 1,000 species, each with their own section designed to accommodate their unique biology. Today, every seat was filled. Every eye, every sensor, every form of perception was focused on the human delegation at the center of the chamber. Ambassador Henry Cole stood at the speaking platform. Looking out at the assembled representatives, he was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes that had seen more than most beings would imagine. He had been present at the Battle of Casper. He had visited the sanctuary. He had looked upon things that would have driven most species mad, and he had not flinched. Thank you for allowing me to address this assembly, he began. I know that many of you are afraid. I know that the events of the past decade have challenged everything you believed about the universe and your place in it. I know that when you look at humanity, you see something that confuses and frightens you. He paused, letting his words settle over the crowd. The chamber was utterly silent. For 12,000 years, your civilizations have lived by a simple rule. Stay quiet. Stay hidden. Do not attract the attention of the things that lurk in darkness. This strategy kept you alive, and I do not criticize you for following it. Survival is the first priority of any species. Henry walked to the edge of the platform, his hands clasped behind his back. But survival is not the same as living. For 12 millennia, you have built your civilizations in the shadows. You have limited your growth, your expansion, your very dreams, all because you were afraid of what might notice you. You have survived, yes, but you have not thrived. A murmur ran through the chamber. Several ambassadors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Humanity chose a different path, Henry continued. When we encountered the Devourers, we did not run. When we learned that the galaxy was full of monsters, we did not hide. We did what our species has always done when faced with something dangerous. We studied it. We learned about it. We figured out how to master it. The holographic display behind him flickered to life, showing images that made half the chamber look away in fear. Devourers patrolling the borders of human space like guard dogs. Thought eaters repurposed as communication relays. Their ability to transmit thoughts across dimensions now used for instant messaging between star systems. Stellar parasites, their appetite for energy directed toward cleaning up the radiation from dying stars. We offer you a different future, Henry said. Not freedom from monsters, but mastery over them. Not darkness, but the light of understanding. The galaxy does not have to be a place of fear. It can be a place of wonder. The Veluxy ambassador rose from his seat. It was Victor, the same insectoid diplomat who had first warned humanity about the Devourers all those years ago. His compound eyes were fixed on Henry with an intensity that was almost painful. Victor asked, and his voice carried across the silent chamber. How did you do what no species has ever done? How did you look upon the face of cosmic horror and not break? Henry smiled, and in that smile, every species present saw something that made them deeply uncomfortable. It was not arrogance. It was not madness. It was the quiet confidence of a creature that knew exactly what it was. We are human, he said simply. We are the species that hunted mammoths with pointed sticks when we barely knew how to make fire. We are the species that tamed wolves and turned them into our partners. We are the species that looked at a horse, an animal that could kill us with one kick, and decided to climb on its back and ride it. We are the species that split the atom, the most destructive force we had ever discovered, and used it to power our cities and heal our sick. He spread his arms wide, encompassing the entire chamber. Every monster we have ever faced, we have eventually mastered. Every terror that tried to destroy us became a tool for our advancement. Your devourers were not special. They were simply the next in a very long line of things that thought they could prey on us. A representative from a species humanity had not yet encountered raised one of its many appendages. "But the sleeper," it said in a voice like grinding stones. "The thing that hunts even the devourers. How can you possibly hope to master that?" The chamber fell silent again. Everyone had heard the rumors. Something ancient was stirring in the spaces between galaxies. Something that made the devourers flee in terror. Something that was slowly, inexorably waking up. Henry's smile did not waver. "We have been preparing for the sleeper for 5 years. Our scientists have studied everything the devourers could tell us about it. Our engineers have built weapons and containment systems based on that knowledge. Our pilots have been training with our tamed devourers, learning how to coordinate them for a battle unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was hard as steel. "When the sleeper fully awakens, it will find humanity waiting for it. Not hiding. Not running. Waiting with every weapon we have ever created and every monster we have ever tamed. And we will show it what we have shown every other predator in our history." "And what is that?" Victor asked quietly. "That there is nothing in this universe, no matter how ancient, no matter how powerful, no matter how terrifying, that cannot be mastered by a species stubborn enough to refuse to be afraid." The chamber erupted into chaos. Some species were cheering. Others were arguing. A few were simply sitting in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just heard. But Victor was watching Henry with something that might have been the beginning of hope. For the first time in his long life, he allowed himself to consider the possibility that the universe did not have to be a place of endless fear, far away. At the edge of the galaxy, the sleeper continued to stir. It was old beyond measure, a thing that had existed since before the stars had formed. It had hunted the devourers across eons, feeding on their terror as they fed on lesser minds. It had no concept of prey that fought back. It had no understanding of creatures that refused to be afraid. It would learn. On the dead moon of Erebus, Amy Holland watched her sensors as they tracked the sleeper's awakening. Beside her, Paul Martinez ran calculations on the trap they had spent 5 years building. Nina Torres stood ready at her control station. Her mind linked to a devourer that was itself trembling with fear at what was coming, and across human space. Billions of ordinary people went about their lives, trusting that their species would handle this threat the same way they had handled every other, by facing it head-on, by refusing to give in to terror, by mastering it, because that was what humans did. The universe was dark and full of terrors. But humanity had been born in darkness. They had been raised by terror. They had spent their entire existence learning how to survive against impossible odds, and now they were ready to show the cosmos what that meant. The sleeper was coming, and humanity would be there to meet it, not as prey, not as victims, but as the masters of monsters, as the species that terror itself had learned to fear.